Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another session on Templot. Tonight, I wanted to start by just having a look at the files that Templot puts on our computer. So if you'll bear with me a moment, I'll bring that up and share the screen. So what I've done is I've just opened my C drive and this is what's on it. I've got two hard disks. The C drive I have all my programs on, and the D drive I have basically data. When you download Templot, it defaults to the C drive. You can tell it to go anywhere, but as the whole system is set up to cross-reference itself on the C drive, unless you're really short of space there, I would suggest that you go with that and that it sit on the C drive. Now, if we come down here past all the Windows stuff, you can see I've actually got two Templot folders here. The first Templot was the original form of Templot, which you downloaded and everything happened within your own PC. It didn't have to log in to the Templot website. I've kept it so that if I'm on my laptop, say, I can still play with Templot, albeit a very primitive version, without having a Wi-Fi connection. But the current issue is one called Templot Dev, here, Templot Development. And all of the Templot files are in there. So if we open that up, we can see what we have. The first file, and really the most important, is the box files file. The file type in Templot .box box are the template files, and each time you save a group of templates to your hard drive, they go into this box files folder in the Templot dev folder on your C disk or elsewhere if you've put it elsewhere. I've done the odd bit of templotting for friends, so each time I've done a different project, I've put it in a different folder here. But the one down here, this is my own layout, Yeovil Town, and if you come in here, you can see that there have been many versions and stages going right back to 2012. It's a ridiculously big project, and like any program that you're working through, just in case you get a glitch on your computer or you get a bit of lightning or there's an outage for some reason, it's always a good idea to save it every hour or so. And so that's what a lot of these are. And you can also see that I think I've got the final form down here in May, for instance, as a storage final, and then there's a final alternative, and then there's a final alternative 2, and then there's a final, and so it goes on. But each one of those is all the templates that were on the trackpad, i.e. in the storage box, saved at that time, and they all go into one of these files. So that's the box files, that's your track templates, that's where your track is.
Laurie?
Yeah?
Can I just
Yep.
a minute? What's the top one, the mech box?
It's an alternative file that has recently, well, to me recently, come available. And when you save the templates into the box files, it saves them, and then it asks you if you want to save a mech file as well.
Yes.
I've never used it. I don't know what it is.
I think it's for if you want to deliver the project to someone else, it makes it more convenient to transfer the files over to them.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks. Would you need a Templot program to open them?
Yes. I don't really understand the differences, but from sharing files on Templot forum, it's far easier if you drop the mechbox file in there than the box file for other people to pick it up and see what you've done and what you were trying to achieve. I don't know why that is. I don't know what additional information's in a mechbox file that isn't in a box file.
I've always declined on the occasion I've done something for somebody else. I've just sent the box files and the shape files over, and they've had a template and been able to open it. Okay, so that's the box files. That's where your track is. The next ones are to do with different forms of file output. And this again is where I am lacking knowledge, and some of you computer guys might be able to help me out. I think a DXF file is a sort of a CAD drawing file.
Yes, AutoCAD.
It's a nightmare.
Right. Okay.
There's more than one DXF. Yeah.
I did manage to output a DXF file. I've only output one file, and that was for Alan Smith, who kindly got all my irregular baseboard tops cut. And I was surprised I managed to do it. I just followed the instructions to output a DXF file. I'll show you where that is when we get to output. He managed to do whatever he did with it to get it to talk to a CNC controlled router that a friend had. And apparently they pushed the button and out came 8 baseboard tops. So I was very pleased about it, but I haven't got a clue what went on. But that's an option you have there for people who know about it. EMF files, I can't help you with. I don't know if that means anything to anybody else. No. Down here are image files. You can also output PDF and JPEG and PNG files of what's on the trackpad, and that can be useful for people if you're trying to show people who don't have Templot, or if you're writing something up in a journal. I can show you some of those in a little bit, but again, I don't want to spend time coming in and out of the screen share to do that. So these next set of files, again, I've never gone into and never used. The shape files is another important one, and this will have all the non-track detail that you've added through the shapes menu. And again, a bit later on, I hope we'll have time to have a look at that. And you can see again, I've used that for some of the Templots that I've done. And again, Yeovil Town has a load of shapes files. So if you want to draw in the building, the rivers, bridges, what have you, it's a rather tedious way of doing it because you build it up line by line, or you can do rectangles, circles, ellipses, which is a help when you're laying out the scenery or deciding where to cut your boards and so on. And again, you see we've had various versions of this for the Yeovil Town. Since I did most of my Yeovil Town stuff, there's a new facility has come on board called Sketchboard. I've only had the briefest of looks at this because I don't really have a need to go and draw anything new because I've done it all under the old shapefiles mechanism. One thing I know it will do is to extract a track plan that you can then print out and use as the basis for a control panel, for instance. Templot 3 is a version of Templot which will download the code to you so that you can play around with the code if you're able to do that and rewrite bits of it so that you can tailor it to the way you want it to operate. Video files, I think that's so that you can record the sort of things we're going to do tonight on the trackpad, but again, I've not used it. And then the various individual files down here, this group here are calibrations for the printer and paper. Again, we'll talk about this when we come on to output. You can calibrate the particular paper for your particular printer and then save that as a file, and it will proportionately increase or decrease the scale separately in X and Y so that it will output an absolutely accurate plan. These are the operating files, the exec files and so on, and the rest here I don't know. So that's what's on your C disk. The key ones really are the box files and the shape files, and if you do it, the sketchboard files. Okay, so I'm going to just come out of that a moment, and I'm going to come on to my desktop. As you can see, I like icons. Templot, when it downloads, gives you the option of putting an icon on the desktop, and I've got one for the original Templot and one for Templot 2. And this is the way I usually open it. It's just bring on your desktop and click on it. It tells me there's a session already running. Do I want to run another one? I've actually got 3 running, and I'll just say yes to follow this through. Now, you can either just go with its default preferences, or you can go using your own preferences. I would say click Go using my preferences, and there are options to set your preferences and also to remember whatever preferences you finished using the last time. So this now opens Templot. This is the program panel, which has its own menus, some of which I use. For instance, under preferences here, you can bring up some saved preferences, but the most important thing is here whether you choose or not to save the preferences you are using when you quit. In other words, when you finish Templot and come out of it. And in that, you can either exclude or include generator settings. And the generator settings are the list of settings which define which components of the track you're telling Templot to construct. So that's the preferences. In the session, you can select which project you're going to go. You can set up gauge and scale to start with. That brings up the other menu again. You can set up your printer. These will come into later. Bring up Sketchboard and write notes and the rest of it. File is an early way to go in and pull up files that you've stored in the past, whether they're your box files for templates. You can also export a file somewhere else. You can go straight to the storage box, which is the list of the templates. Background gives you the option to go into background shapes and bring those up again if you want. Program are a lot of sort of the mechanics of it, which again I've never used. Now I'm going to pick out this menu head here, Trackpad, because this is like the view menu on a Windows file. It's the suite of options that controls what you see and what you do on the trackpad. So we've already seen a couple of them, like show or hide the information panel, right? Which is this one here. I usually put it down at the bottom because it's a bit more out of the way there. All right, show the control template. So if, for instance, if I was bringing up Yeovil Town and I don't want to manipulate anything, I just want to inspect it or find some dimensions from it, I don't want to see the control template. So I can hide the control template. There she goes. Or I can bring it back if I want to play with it. Okay, hide name labels, we've seen that. It will indicate which was the last template that you stored by emboldening the timbers, if you want to do that. Reminders, I think that's like a notepad that you can put things on. Right, this can be useful. Page outlines, particularly if when you're coming to print something off, because at the moment you can see there are no page outlines there at all. I'm going to zoom it right back to the 0, and here you can see we've got the full grid here, or at least I'm going to go back to the datum of the grid, and it shows you just how big the grid is as well. I'm just going to bring this one back over here. Right, so there you can see there's the 0 datum for the grid, 0 on Y, 0 on X, and these are now 6-inch squares. The grids have stayed as they were. Bring it up to 1 zoom higher. Now coming back to the trackpad again, right, page outlines for printer. Okay, now I think it defaults to A4 pages, and each of the dotted outlines is 1 page.
Right.
So that if we made that control template the turnout, for instance, and we bring it there, just for an example, say I want to print that template just to make that A8 point and build that as a separate unit. The problem I've got there is it's straddling 2 pages, and it needn't. as it's a single template, okay, I could simply shift and join and bring it so that it's all on one page here. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've got a load of stuff on there, like Yeovil Town, and you want to print off a unit of track, say a crossover or a little fan of 2 or 3 points, then it's very useful to be able to change the pages, move the pages around. So first of all, you put the page outlines on for the printer, and then with the action, we have an option to move page origin with the mouse, just like we move the template, and it moves the whole grid. That can be very useful. Other things down on the trackpad that you can alter with the way the trackpad appears, the drawing board appears. You can either show or hide the zoom panels. You can set your grid options. You can set their spacing. As I said, you can set metric. You can set them by feet and inches. You can set the color. You can have them as dotted lines, solid lines. You can have the grid on. You can have the grid off. Okay, sketchboard items, you can show or hide those. As I said, I don't use the sketchboard, so I can't help you very much on that, I'm afraid. This is to do with mouse functions, how the mouse cursor and that appears. Now down here, you've got some control template options, like the appearance of the peg, whether it's solid or hollow. Hollow helps you see where the center of it is if you want to be really accurate. You can select whether you're showing the timber outlines, whether they're solid, whether they're open, whether you can pick out whether you show rail joints and marks. We picked those out, if you remember, when we were showing what the prototypical extent of the switch unit was and the crossing unit. You've got a number of background options here. Background is whatever has been saved before and is shown on your trackpad. Everything other than the control template. So here you can set the colors of everything on the background, templates, shapes and so on. You can show what elements of the track you want to include. You can decide whether or not you actually want to show the background templates. You can show names or not. You can decide whether or not you include the background shapes on the trackpad. You can choose what color you want to apply. And then finally, you can decide what colors each individual component of everything is if you are so moved. Again, the default set to me is pretty clear. I rarely change that. So we've had a look at the options we have for tailoring the trackpad and its appearance and function to your own preferences, by either using some of the menus in the program panel or the trackpad suite of menus from the main menu bar. Lots of options, but there is one that is a must, and that is setting the gauge, which we mentioned briefly when we were looking at the program panel. If you haven't set the gauge already, then do it now, and from the trackpad the easiest way is via the gauge heading in the main menu bar at the top. Templot will build track plans in any gauge under the sun, basically. Here's the short list, and you can see that I've got my preference set to 2mm fine scale. But you've got different N gauges, there's S, HOs, various 4mm, these are the O gauge ones, and then you get to the big live steamy stuff as well. If you want the full list, then you can begin to see just what range you have. There's all the TT, the 3mm gauges in there. Just about every gauge that has been devised is in there. So if you want to model something in 4mm, for instance, you wanted to do it, say, in EM, they're all in size order, roughly. So these are the EMs you've got. If you wanted an 18.2 millimeter gauge EM, then you click that. Okay, and it gets bigger. But as we are a 2 millimeter organization, and that's all I do, we'll go back to the 2 millimeter fine scope. If you haven't told it that you like S2, it will start you in a unique scale called T55, which is really just a trigger to force you to go into gauge and set the gauge you want. So just check that you're on the right gauge to start with. The other thing you can do is, as I said, you can set the grid to whatever intervals you want, and whether you want it in metric or old money. I tend to standardize to metrics, and I set it at 150 millimeter intervals, which is roughly 6 inches.